Hello, everyone, and welcome back. It's another episode of the In the Clutch podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Michael, and we're joined by a full barn of Clutch Sports media personalities tonight. We got Gavin Russell, Larry Larson, John Camosa, and Joey Wright all hopping in tonight. Fellas, should be a good podcast. Another great week of high school football. Really exciting, honestly. We're peaking at the right time, I think.
Yeah, you'd hope so, right? A lot of good games last week, and a lot of good games coming up this week.
John, I am excited this week. It's week 8, 2 weeks of the season left. I'm excited to see all those teams in our area sitting at 3, 4 wins who still have a little work to do to get the job done. You know, the playoff picture is starting to fill itself in. As you well know, you had a great story on Clutch Sports Media Overtime today, a little preview, and I'm excited to see who can get over the hump from 3-4 and 4-3. Still got a little work to do. Let's ride, baby. Let's do this thing.
I always think of this time of the season as what they call in NFL Red Zone the witching hour, where wins become losses and losses become wins. But this is really, the most crucial part of the regular season right here. The push for the playoffs, push for your spots. And, every game just means that much more as the weather turns to football weather. It's just getting really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, you got your Mid-Illini and your Big 12, and these are shaping up to be some great games, not only for teams that have already clinched their spot in the playoffs, but for potential title bursts on the line. We got Morton at Dunlap, and then we also have Normal West at Peoria High. We have Notre Dame versus Normal Community. These are going to be some great games this week. I'm really looking forward to it.
Certainly, and Gavin, you bring up a great point with the weather. Friday's looking like it's probably going to be some rain, either possibly before or during the games, or maybe even both, honestly. And as some may remember, I'm sure the Peoria High fans listening to this may not want to remember, but that Week 8 game, the Normal West against Peoria High that we were at last year, that was the Lions' first loss of the season, and it was just in wet, sloppy conditions. The football was like a bar of soap, pretty much, and really just kind of changed the outcome of the game. I think if it was in direct conditions, I think it would have been certainly at least a closer game, if maybe not a win by Peoria High. And I think that that weather could certainly make things a lot more interesting. Make some games that maybe normally wouldn't be close, maybe make them a little closer, maybe even change the outcomes of some games. So stay tuned to our weather graphics on our broadcast this week. Normal West and Peoria High on CI Proud and Morton and Dunlap on ClutchSportsIL.com.
Yeah, it's hey, that wet bar of soap, it's gonna be slipping.
It will indeed. But what's not slipping though is the Washington Panthers in the Mid-Illini standings. They pulled out a 28-7 win over Dunlap. That was a really fun game to watch. Defense turned into offense on the same play. 2 pick sixes from Garrett Cox and Noah Bell. Defensive linemen, how about them? Got to clap it up for them. The D linemen getting some touchdowns, probably some of their first, if not already their first high school football touchdowns. So gotta feel good for them. And the Panthers again just really were able to get it done, shut down a dynamic Dunlap offense.
Yeah, that was a really fun one to be at, John. I know we were on the call for that and just took me completely by surprise, seeing those 2 defensive touchdowns. I think that, of course, got to give a lot of credit to the defense for making those plays, but we did start to see kind of the effects of long season, colder weather conditions. It was a really windy night, kind of coming into play in effect. A little bit harder to play through. The young quarterbacks for Dunlap maybe haven't faced that as much in their career. So a few mistakes there, but this is the time to kind of work out those kinks. Again, Washington got really fortunate there and made the big plays when they needed to, ultimately coming out with the victory. But I think for a team like Dunlap, they have a lot to grow upon here in these last couple of weeks, which undoubtedly makes them a better team come playoff time.
Yeah, and John, just being on the sidelines for that game with Washington, we talked about this in the beginning of the season. 27 seniors. This is Daryl Crouch's last year. They're a senior-laden team. Dunlap, still a lot of young guys, only 8 seniors on this team. We saw those penalties kind of cost them late in this game against Washington. So still mistakes that they have to learn on. But I think the defense right now with Washington, like you said, those 2 big pick sixes were huge. In practice, they're always on each other. I talked to Daryl Crouch. He says, anytime you can score 2 touchdowns on defense, that's huge. That proved to be the difference in this game. And I think they carried that momentum into their game against Canton. And then obviously if Morton can get a win over Dunlap. Week 9 can ultimately set up as your Mid-Illini Conference championship.
Yeah, certainly, if that Washington Morton game week 9 is, one that, we're probably pretty whatever algorithm. I don't know if it was a computer, maybe they were handpicked. My guess it was probably an algorithm or computer that picked just the schedules, for the Mid-Illini.
They rotate through every year. I think that's kind of how it goes for most conferences, is like they just have a standard rotation that kind of shifts a week down every year, I think.
I think for the Mid-Illini, what it is they have pretty much, they go in kind of like 2-year schedules. So like, whatever for example, Morton's schedule is this year in the Mid-Illini, that will be their same exact schedule next year, just home and away is flipped.
Yep.
And that's a 2-year cycle. So we'll probably get Washington and Morton in week 9 again last year, or again next year, I should say. We'll see Morton Dunlap week 8, Washington Dunlap week 7, again next year. So if we were looking, 51, 52 weeks ahead, there's going to be some good football there too. And I'm not sure
about that far.
Not sure if you have the calendar already circled for that, but it should be some great games and everything. Washington Morton's getting a big one. Morton Dunlap also a big one as well. We'll talk about that one later in the broadcast. Then our other game, Larry, you were down at Bloomington, our return to Fred Carlton Field. Actually, shouldn't say a return. I think it was our first time ever broadcast.
Yeah, come on. Not a return.
We were glad to be down in Bloomington, and we saw Peoria High and their wide receivers put on a show.
Yeah. We saw some encouraging signs from both defenses in the first quarter, and ultimately you look at the final score, which was heavily in favor of Peoria High. That wasn't really indicative of the game that we saw in the first quarter. I think there were 3 plays where there were 3 straight turnovers, and I think a lot of that had to do with the wind. It had to do with the conditions. All of a sudden these guys have to adjust to the cold, and trying to catch the ball on the cold and trying to catch the ball in the wind. It does make a difference. A few interceptions from Tino Gist, one in the first quarter, but then, man, he must took that personal, because second quarter, there was no turning back. Peoria High ran away with it. And like I said, some encouraging signs from a, all things considered, still pretty young Bloomington team. But Peoria just did what they did.
All right, as I guess we'll move on past Peoria High and Bloomington. Then Bloomington's a team certainly to watch out for at 4-3. Has some big games coming up against Champaign Central and Decatur MacArthur. So looking to clinch playoff eligibility for the first time in a couple of years. The Purple Raiders have been waiting for, and that's a team that has been really interesting to follow all season long. So
John, I would give them a pretty good chance against Champaign Central this week, and I have a lot of respect for Tim Turner and what he's done with those Maroons, but they took one on the chin last week to Danville on a Saturday afternoon. The Vikings put up 63 points in the first half. Central did get on the board with a couple of touchdowns late, but all told, it was not the Maroons' day. And I thought that game would be a little more competitive. Champaign Central's got a talented quarterback, and George Rouse. Ronald Baker's a fantastic tailback, but just speaking on what I saw from the Maroons on Saturday, I would expect Bloomington to come out and definitely have the upper hand. So you can't take anyone lightly. We'll see if the Maroons bounce back from a tough showing. But I like Bloomington's odds of going to the playoffs for the first time since 2018.
Yeah, certainly. And, I obviously, a win gets you into the playoffs probably for sure. Another win against Decatur MacArthur, which I think should be a great game of week 9. One that you may not think of right away, but it's going to be really good. You should keep an eye on. It's going to be big for playoff seeding for them. If you want more about playoff seeding, playoff projections, we just released a full 8-class bracket projection for obviously all class 1A through 8A. All the projected brackets to this point right now. We'll have another one coming out next week as well, and also little capsules on each team that's either projected or maybe it's projected to be either in or just out of the playoffs. That's all on CSM Overtime. Can't miss that one. It's a lot of great stuff. Certainly that itself, I think, is probably worth a subscription right there. And again, we'll have another one coming next week as well, and more playoff coverage. But real quick, guys, recapping some of the other games around the area last week, it was a more exciting slate. There wasn't quite as many blowout wins, at least around the area. Maybe not so much down in Champaign, like Joey just mentioned, but maybe what's one result, one game, or whatever that maybe surprised you a little bit from this past week?
I'll jump in here. I'll say, there were 2 games that kind of may have come as surprises to some folks. First one, it didn't result in a win for the Gray Ghosts, but their first half performance was strong against an undefeated Bloomington Central Catholic team. So I tip my cap to the Gray Ghosts. I think they only trailed 14-0 at the half. That's impressive on the road against one of the best teams in that conference. And we all know what Bloomington Central Catholic has done, and we've had them on prior episodes, and they're a bit of a wagon this year. So, and IBC still looking for that first win. Who knows? Maybe we could get it here in these last 2 weeks. Some positive momentum for them. And then, looking at CSM Pick'em, it was a surprise for everybody except yours truly. EPG taking home the road win over Eureka. Not just a close one. It was 28-7. That's an impressive win for El Paso Gridley. Cameron Shoemaker, their quarterback, really a true dual threat guy. He's on our top performers on Instagram seemingly every week for all his rushing performances. So I was really impressed with EPG, and a lot of people were surprised. I can't say I was.
Yeah, certainly.
Well, I got to jump in on my thing now because Larry's touting, his CSM pick'em last week. How about I picked with Joey's Wright's Champaign Centennial over Peoria Notre Dame? So how about the Chargers doubling up the Irish? And maybe that was a surprise to me for sure. I thought that would have been an absolute nail biter. Centennial has a winning record at the moment, but they had played some easier opponents. They hadn't really been super competitive in those better opponent games. P&D, on the other hand, had been picking up steam. They had beaten Jacksonville, been really competitive with Bloomington, but Centennial just looked like the team I think people wanted them to be all year long. So now Centennial kind of picking up steam going to later weeks. Same with P&D, still a lot of opportunity there, but kind of a couple sleeper teams heading, both teams probably going to find themselves a team that can be really competitive going into playoff time.
Yeah, Gavin, that's a game that 2 weeks ago wouldn't have surprised me, but Centennial hit a little bit of a snag in the road. 2 tough losses there to Bloomington and Danville. Honestly, Danville might be a team to watch because the Vikings are starting to play some really good football. But yeah, the Chargers bouncing back. They've got a pretty good core. Kellen Davis is a great quarterback. Kodiak Pruitt at tailback. They've got a really good defense. Jack Barnhart and company do a nice job with that defensive unit. So Centennial might be a team to keep an eye on. To chime in with my surprises, two teams in our area that suffered losses. A little bit of a surprise to me. I thought Princeville might have had some upset potential in a big game at Stark County and Toulon this past week, but the Rebels are back. Stark County seems to have figured it out after a few down years, and Princeville's only losses previously were Rova Williamsfield and Knoxville. Those teams have combined 13-1 now, but Stark County wasn't the Prince's week. The Rebels have it cooking, and Farmington too. Also a really good test for the Farmers this week. They fell a little short. I thought they might have some upset potential in that game too against Anawan Weathersfield, but you look at what Anawan Weathersfield is doing right now. The Titans are 6-1. The Farmers were undefeated and 6-0 going into last week, and now 2 6-1s. So two setbacks. I still like Princeville's odds of getting into the playoffs. They're 4-3 now, and Farmington's already there at 6-1. But just a reminder that the small school action is just as competitive as you get in the Mid-Illini and Big 12.
Yeah, I think one of the games that kind of surprised everybody, and I think going back to Larry's point, it was kind of pick 'em across the board, except for Joey Wright and myself. It was Chatham Glenwood 35-0 win over Normal U High. I mean, me and Joey, the only ones that picked them. I don't think anybody really saw that coming. I kind of said flip a coin on this game. I thought it'd be down to the wire, but really big statement win. This is a Glenwood team that only lost by a touchdown to Springfield Sacred Heart Griffins. So they're 5-2 on the year now, really rolling ahead. And then Normal U High obviously trying to bounce back after that loss. And then, also to Larry's point, Eureka with that loss to EPG. EPG's kind of rolling right now. So, a lot of things shaping up in small school football. So could get really exciting down the road here.
Certainly, those were all great points, guys. And just kind of putting a bow on this one real quick, Joko, to your point, Normal U High, they were coming off 2 just obviously didn't play the strongest opponents in the 2 prior weeks in Springfield, Lanphier, and Urbana, who were both winless on the season. And U High put up, either close to, if not more than 70 in both games. So, I think in pick 'em, unless you guys maybe blinded by the fact that, hey, their offense, is rolling right now. And, obviously, you're going to win big against both of those teams. But, putting up 70 points still is no small feat. So, I think, kind of unexpected there. And normal U High, though, was still playoff eligible for the first time, I believe, since I want to say I'm gonna get the
2016, I believe, John. It was the last time they played Urbana.
Yep. Yeah. So
And just a plug here, Caden Sexton, one of our writers, gave a nice article about Normal U High and Bloomington. Bloomington, if you're a Raiders fan, you knock on wood, but those two teams are returning to the playoffs for the first time in a while.
That's also a great plug. I was going to mention that too. Looks like I think there's a good chance that all 5 Bloomington normal teams, you include U High, Central Catholic, Bloomington, West, and Community, all make the playoffs. So great football being played in the Twin Cities down this year. And also real quick, again, El Paso Gridley, I think, Eureka, they were carrying a lot of momentum, a young team this year. They were playing at home. I picked them. I, by the way, had an abysmal week at 5-5 in pick 'em last week. I was disgraced by it. So trying to rebound this week for sure. But El Paso Gridley, I mean, I knew that game was going to be close, but they really pulled away. And like Larry said, Cameron Schumacher is probably the best player in the area that you maybe have never heard of before. Hopefully you've heard of him because you follow our social media and look at our top performers each week. But he's the real deal for the Titans, and they're a really good team that is trying to make some noise in Class 2A. If I had to pick one myself, I'm surprised that no one else had picked this yet. I'm kind of glad no one didn't stole it. Elmwood Brimfield won 52-8 on the road against Macomb. Now, Macomb isn't quite as good as they were last year, but they're still a borderline playoff team. And Elmwood Brimfield was 1-5 coming into that game, and such a just dominant showing on the road. I think it shows how good that Todd Hollis' team really is. We haven't talked about him a ton. It's been a bit of a down year for them. They're probably not going to make the playoffs, but they showed it against Farmington a couple weeks ago that they hung with the Farmers, almost won that game. They've had a couple other really close losses too. So Elmwood Brimfield, I think, is a team that may come up just short this year, but it really is not indicative of how good they are as a team. They're again adjusting to a new conference at Lincoln Trail Prairie Land is more competitive this year. So certainly they're also having a good year as well. So real quick, whatever. Obviously, we've seen 7 weeks of the regular season now. As Joey has a point they want to make. Let's hit the rewind.
Before we move on, had to get your attention, had to throw the challenge flag. It was 2015 the last time U High made the playoffs. I wanted to straighten that out. I know one thing about U High, it's right there in the name. They're smart folks, so I want to make sure that we get that clarity. 2015 is their last playoff berth, not 2016. It's like it's pardon the interruption or around the horn, where they correct they corrections. So.
Well, if you're around the horn, you're losing points.
I know.
You might get voted off for the next segment.
So there's no actually. So that means I was the one that. Well, no, Joey was the one that said 2016.
I said it.
So
if there's no
Joey around the podcast next week, then you know why, fellas. But I appreciate the fact checking. We always strive for accuracy and the highest standard at Clutch Sports Media. So appreciate you double checking on that, Joey. So, but anyway, real quick, kind of go into we've seen 7 weeks of the regular season now, guys. We've seen a lot of different teams now at this point. I want you all to pick a team and something that team reminds you of. It could be anything, any noun. It could be, an object, a food, heck, even a song maybe. So we'll go around the horn. Whoever wants to start can go ahead. Pick a team and something that they remind you of.
I'll start here because this is something you got to really ponder here. And my mind went here first from pre-show events, but I'm going to compare the Metamore Redbirds to one of those generic ice cream sandwiches you get from the grocery store. Which I see Joey right with the chuckle, but
I had an ice cream sandwich just moments ago. It's really good. It's from Myers.
The ice cream sandwich, they're very good. They never let you down. They get the job done when you need to. But when do you go above and beyond? Now, Metamora right now sitting in pretty comfortably 5-2. They're going to make the playoffs probably at least at 5-4. Coming into a week against East Peoria, and then they finish off against Dunlap. I'm just looking for Metamora to take that extra step. When do you become the ice cream sandwich? Maybe then you go to the pine of Ben and Jerry's. When do you take that step up? I think Metamora definitely has the potential to do so. Now they've again have that big test in week 9 against Dunlap, But if they really want to be in that big playoff conversation, really competing with teams, as you mentioned, John, the bracketology that you did on CSM Overtime, putting them up against some pretty hefty opponents potentially, in the first round. If they can make to the second round, going to face some really stiff competition. Just looking for them to take that step forward a little bit. They've gotten the job done against some of those lower level competition teams. But again, as we head into these last couple of weeks, where are we going to see the Redbirds become more competitive come playoff time?
Love it.
Quite the comp.
Well, hey, I'll chime in and go second. Washington Panthers. We're all basketball fans here too, and you watch the NCAA tournament. Maybe one of the best parts, is one shining moment at the end of the tournament. I think that's one shining moment is kind of what I think of when I think of the Panthers. I mean, you've got Daryl Crouch in his last season. A really good team, number 3 in the IHSA's Class 6A AP poll that came out earlier today. They've been steadily climbing. Played Kankakee really well earlier this year. Of course, if they want to make a state title run, you'd think they'd probably have to go through East St. Louis at some point. But that's kind of it's kind of the vibe I'm getting with these Panthers is, hey, a lot of cool memories and a lot of I don't know, a lot of pageantry.
Shining moments.
Yeah, a lot of shining moments, a lot of pageantry. I'm sure that's a narrative Daryl Crouch is getting a little tired of hearing. Last year, I think he'd prefer it to be about his guys, but he's got a really good team, and people all over the area are saying, hey, that Coach Washington's got, he's in his last year. How cool would that be if he could cap it with the state title? I think it would be an emotional day in at Hancock Stadium should he do that. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but that's
Joey,
my rambling answer.
It's been a while since March. I'm not sure I remember how that song goes. Could you give me like a refresher? Maybe sing a verse or two?
Nope. Sorry. My throat hurts. Can't sing. Can't get a
Must be the ice cream sandwich, huh?
Yeah. No, I got a big game to call myself on Friday. Arcola and Arthur Lovington at Wood Hammond. So I gotta.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I'll give you a pass. Maybe next week.
Maybe we'll see how it plays out. Maybe when they win a state title. How about that?
Okay. All right.
If Washington wins a state title, I'll record a cover and we'll post it on our YouTube. Just a full song cover.
Do it.
How about that?
Sounds like a deal to me.
Let's do it.
I got kind of something off the top of my head here. John, you were saying items. I had to look at my phone. OtterBox. You drop this thing, no matter how many times you drop it, you could dent it, you could scratch it, doesn't break. Normal community. This team does bounce backs from everything. Under the helmet, these guys don't get phased. This is a team that continues to roll on throughout the season, just like the OtterBox. Doesn't break.
Wow, I like that. That's creative. Not a sponsor, by the way. So
not a sponsor.
Free promo.
Not yet. They aren't.
Not yet. OtterBox folks, come on, call us up. I'm gonna go a little more generic here. Sorry to let everybody down, but having just watched Peoria High, I can't help but watch them and have them remind me of the Miami Dolphins. Just endless offensive weapons, from quarterback to wide receiver to running back, a strong defense with a lot of playmakers. I mean, that wide receiving core in and of itself, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. I mean, Peoria is even deeper at the high school level with TQ Webb, Sean Franklin, Javen Moore. I mean, last week, they had 5 different wide receivers catch touchdowns. There are not many high school teams that can say in a single game they've had 5 different wide receivers catch touchdown passes. And then you can't forget about Malik Ross in the backfield. We all know what that Dolphins run game is like right now, especially if you play fantasy football. Malik Ross is a guy that you'd want on your fantasy team. And then at quarterback, Tino Gist really reminds me a little bit of a right-handed Tua Tagovailoa, excuse me. He came into the league, Tua did, out of Alabama, a little shaky at first. Tino got slid into the starting role as a sophomore. That's very hard to do. He had his growing pains, but you could see the talent was there. Now as a senior, he's blossomed into one of the best quarterbacks in the area. Tua is one of the best quarterbacks in the league. So many parallels between the Peoria High Lions and the Miami Dolphins.
That's a great one, Larry. And honestly, all you guys, I'm impressed with all your guys' picks. I was kind of going in between two. I had one for Dunlap. I had one for Morton. I like my one for Morton a little bit more. I'm gonna go the food route like Gavin did. I'm gonna compare Morton to tacos. Obviously you ask people what their favorite food is. A lot of people are gonna say pizza. Pizza gets a lot of the love, or hamburgers or steaks or something like that. Tacos, as this stuff been going through on my mind this week, is I like I kind of think like, hey, I really need some tacos. I haven't had some in a while, and because they're just really good, and you don't maybe think about them all the time. And I think Morton is the same way. Washington, gets a lot of love, and for the right reasons. And they certainly have a special season brewing, like you mentioned, Joey. But you got to remember that Morton is right there, and they can easily take that top spot. They add you some spice. They got Jude Hart being able to run and throw. He's got a lot of different receivers. Maybe add those as like the toppings. Maybe GB Kruzik is the onions, and Julian Alexander is the cheese, and you got Sean Buffington, the meat in the taco and everything. And and obviously you got Adam O'Neill, the Peoria High head coach, is a tortilla that just kind of wraps it all up. So and then everyone's kind of the hot sauce. That's maybe Morton's defense. Maybe that's their offensive line as well. Two units that are both very good. So I'm gonna compare Morton to the tacos and everything. I don't think they'll abandon the Hogs nickname for tacos anytime soon. But maybe if they don't have a taco theme night in Morton, I'm all ears.
So do we need to start calling them the Morton Carnitas
Yes.
rather than the Morton Hogs?
John, who's the guacamole on the team?
Oh boy, guacamole. It's kind of like, well, guacamole. You kind of feel it, at least like maybe
it's like the two-way player.
Top.
Yeah.
That two-way player. I'm gonna go. How about either maybe Brett Michael and Noah Losi.
Yeah,
two guys that can really get it done on both sides of the ball. Obviously trying to think of other two-way players. Buffington's a two-way player. GB Kruzik's a two-way player. Clint Teeters made some plays on both sides of the ball. I mean, there's a lot of people that could be the guacamole on Washington.
I like that analogy.
Or Morton. So, appreciate you chiming in with that. So, fun segment, guys. We'll, as much as I love to talk about that, maybe even keep it going. You got to move things on here. Let's preview this week's games. There are some big ones. We'll start with our game on ciproud.com. Normal West and Peoria High. Latif Love and I will have the call for that one. Let you guys start, though. Maybe what do you expect out of that game? Maybe Gavin, will start with you because I know you've seen Normal West earlier this year.
Yeah, and I picked a bad week to not be able to call a game this week, but I'll certainly be tuning in. It's going to be some exciting football. Probably, arguably, one of the most exciting weeks of football between both of our games, here on both CSM game and CI Proud. But getting back to the CI Proud game, Normal West, saw them earlier this year. I definitely think that, as you can see, they have the makings to be a really good team. They've been a really good team. They've had some snafus from time to time, weren't all that competitive with Normal Community, but we see how good they are this season. When Normal West clicks, though, when everything is going right, they're going to be one of the best teams around. They just have to get over some of those mental mistakes. Sometimes when things don't go their way, it just seems to slow them down a little bit. So going into this game with a little more confidence, just trying to establish themselves early, remembering, hey, last year we took care of business against these Lions. We handed them a loss on a rainy evening on a Friday night in week 8, just trying to do the same thing again this year, which again, the weather conditions could play a factor once again. So we'll see that, but Peoria High also coming off a big game. We'll see what they can do. It's just going to be a really high-powered matchup.
Yeah, certainly. And I've talked to both head coaches already this weekend. I think, first of all, the one thing that's going to be on both their minds a lot is the weather. It played a big factor in last year's game. Obviously, this year, instead of playing on normal West natural grass field, they're playing on the new artificial turf at Peoria High, which, by the way, has these little wood chips in that turf. If you remember, I had a video package in week 1 that kind of toured all of our viewers around the new Peoria Stadium and all the renovations to it. Those new wood chips, they help kind of drain water a little bit better. So hopefully we'll get some pretty, fairly dry conditions. Obviously, we'd like that, certainly, since we're there broadcasting the game, and not have to be possibly getting rained on.
We don't have wood chips in our cameras.
Oh boy, that would be quite the story. But obviously, no matter what the weather conditions are, it's going to be a great game. We're going to see two teams that really like to pass a lot. You're going to see. I'm going to go as far as saying that you won't see a better game in the entire state with more talent at wide receiver than in that game. You got Normal West, who has Gavin Camp, who's a do-it-all player, major threat at wide receiver. Yeah, Big Mike Williams, who is a guy who's really impressed this year, all Big 12 potential there. Yeah, Malik Givens, who's been able to kind of take advantage of being maybe the number 3 guy with all the attention being put on Camp and on Camp and Williams and everything. I mean, been able to thrive. And then you also have Sincere Brown, transfer from Normal Community, who's really had some big games this year. And then they'll have a sophomore quarterback, Drew Mangrum, who actually, believe it or not, to talk to last night. You mentioned he's a listener of the podcast. So special shout out to Drew Mangrum if you're listening to this. Appreciate talking to you last night and everything. But he'll be starting at quarterback for Normal West with their normal starter, senior Johnny Fryman, still out with a broken hand. So something to monitor. I think if Normal West can get their ground game going, that'll open things up a lot. Whatever, Pure High is certainly wanting to stop that ground game on defense. And then, offensively, they're going to be trying to pass the ball a lot and, also open things up for Malik Ross. I think there could be a lot of offense in that game. Should be appointment viewing on ciproud.com. But I think you should have 2 screens this week because we have another great game over Morton Dunlap. We'll have Owen Dimple and John Camosa calling that one. John, we'll start with you. What are you kind of looking forward to in that game?
Yeah, I think in about, I'd say at least 90% of the Middle Illini games I've seen this year, it all comes down to the first half. I think the momentum really picks up when you get that lead at halftime. I think that's going to be big for both teams. They know what's on the line. Morton, obviously, they don't want to look ahead. They know Washington should have that win over Canton this upcoming Friday. They'll be sitting up there undefeated in week 9. Morton obviously knows the task at hand with Dunlap. But this is a big game, and I think momentum really comes with getting that early lead, grinding it out in the first and second quarter. And Dunlap obviously cleaning up some of those penalties. We saw a lot of them against Washington, cleaning up some of those interceptions. They obviously, out of those 28 points they allowed, 14 of them came off 2 pick sixes. So I think if they can kind of clean up on that, Gavin, I should say, John, I think we could see a really close game here. I think across the board with the pick'ems, we said this game could come down to the wire, and I do not doubt that this game comes down to the fourth quarter. I could foresee this being about 28-21. I don't want to say who comes out on top as a broadcaster. I can't pick this game, so I'll let it go in the air.
Fair enough. I'm not going to be at either of these games, unfortunately for me, because I feel like I'm going to be missing out. But I'll be tuned in when I can. And I think this Morton team, you're going to see in the pick'em. I'm going to go ahead and give a little tease to pick'em. I picked Dunlap. Now I might catch some flack for that from the Morton folks, rightfully so. I think after you lose a game, you learn a lot, and I think you learn a little bit more when you lose than when you win. I think Dunlap is going to take their mistakes from last week. This is a young team with 2 very young quarterbacks that they play and split time with under center or out of the shotgun, who threw 2 pick sixes last week. I just don't think that's going to happen again this week. Morton's certainly been tested. They're more than capable of winning this game. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, and I won't pretend to know any more than you guys. That Peoria Normal West game has some Big 12 implications. I'm decently plugged into the Big 12, and of course I follow the Middle Illini. But with all we do with Clutch, but I can't pretend to know more than you guys who watch these games each week. So it should be 2 good ones, and I'll leave it there.
Well, it's certainly helpful to have our Champaign correspondent Joey Wright always kind of keeping people in the loop about the Big 12. Obviously, I'm sure we get a lot of viewership from the Peoria and Bloomington area that probably a lot of these people, myself probably included, don't really know a lot about the Champaign area schools like Centennial and Danville, who are 2 good programs. And then also you got Champaign Central and Urbana too, who teams will play from time to time.
Well, I tell you, all eyes this week on Arcola and Arthur Lovington Atwood Hammond. Going to be a great one. If you don't feel like watching those guys, that's fine. We've got you covered on Light Rock 97.5, WHMS.com, and the News Gazette app. And that's going to be a really good one. Arcola sitting at 3-4. They need to win their last 2 games to make the playoffs. Arthur Lovington, Atwood, Hammond, of course, Caden Fagan's alma mater, but they've been just fine without him. 7-0 are the Knights. Jace Parsons has done a great job at quarterback. No one can really match Caden Fagan's physicality, but Parsons does a pretty good job. 6'2", 190 pounds. They run an option-based offense, and you look at what Arcola's done. They're a little younger at quarterback. Freshman Brody Phillips running the offense, but they've got a lot of senior. Yeah, he's taken over for Tanner Thomas, who also a younger quarterback last year. He's a Louisville baseball commit, not playing football this year. Brody's done a nice job. His brother Braden's a wide receiver, so they've got that connection, and it's going to be a good one tomorrow or Friday. Whenever we get this uploaded in Arcola, it's going to be senior night. Playoff implications on the line. Arthur's 7-0, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that. It's going to be really good one.
We'd have to drive way past Bloomington to pick that one up on the radio.
Well, hey, you don't need a radio. You can listen on WHMS.com or the News Gazette app. John, one other game I'm keeping an eye on. I know it's a little unconventional. My alma mater, Urbana and Manual, 2-0-7 teams, but it's the best opportunity for either side to grab a win this season. Manual's been shut out its last couple tries. Urbana's been up and down, but mostly down, just trying to get back on the varsity football field. So give a little love to the 0-7 teams. It'll be a good opportunity.
I like that.
Build for next year, and you get a game like that late in the season, someone's got to win it. That's what makes it kind of fun.
Yeah, certainly. That's those games mean something too, and I don't think the fact that both those teams are 0-7 takes anything away. That is a meaningful game for both teams. As there will be lots of meaningful games up in Week 8. We encourage you all to tune in wherever you go, or maybe you're out watching your favorite team in person as well. But wherever you guys are, hope you guys have a great Friday night. We'll talk to you next week on the In the Clutch podcast. I'm Jonathan Michael alongside Gavin Russell, Larry Larson, John Camosa, and Joey Wright saying so long for now. We'll talk to you next week. Have a good weekend.